Everyone, thanks for joining us today. This is a co-hosted webinar brought to you by Webbula and Ongage. I'm Danny from Ongage, and with us today are Jenna and Brian from Webbula. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Okay, so the topic for our webinar today was that?
No, go ahead.
All right. So the topic for our webinar today is email hygiene best practices for increased delivery. And we're going to be talking about spam traps, bots, moles, zombies, screamers, honeypots, and a whole lot of other cool stuff, which, by the way, all sounds a lot like some kind of a horror movie. So it's going to be super interesting, and I'm sure we're going to be able to provide you with some really nice tips and tricks for your email marketing operations. So I guess we can start. Over to you guys.
All right. Thanks, Danny. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Thanks for taking time off from your busy schedules and joining us. This is our Jenna and I's first webinar together. So if we make a mistake or if I inadvertently make her laugh and she loses herself in giggles fits, which is pretty much been happening regularly on our reviews today. So if that happens, just forgive us.
We're going to have some fun today.
Yeah, so thanks to Ongage for giving us this opportunity, this platform. Really, really appreciate it. We're going to tell, first of all, let's introduce ourselves. My name is Brian Ward. I am the Chief Marketing Officer here at Webbula.
And I am Jenna Domini. I'm the Marketing and Communication Specialist at Webbula.
She is. She is not really that tiny. It's just in perspective to me. Let's share our screen and get started here. Hold on just a second. So there we go. Okay. So we did that. What? What about it? Oh, no. All right, there we go. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking a little bit about email hygiene best practices, how that affects deliverability, hopefully in a positive way, but also sometimes in a negative way. And so this will tell you a little bit. We're not going to spend a lot of time on who we are, or I'm going to tell you a little bit about Webbula. Webbula's been around for 9 years now, started almost a decade ago, sending out a lot of emails to our customers and our email list, and doing a lot of things that I'm sure a lot of you are doing. And they were getting results back that were mystifying. We're getting a lot of bounces, a lot of returns, a lot of the data was bad. It was getting trapped into things, and a lot of stuff that they really didn't expect. And out of that, came a desire to learn a little bit more about why. And that journey resulted in the creation of some really powerful tools that turned out to be our primary business model for the last 9 years, which is our email hygiene product, which we call Cloud Hygiene, and our data appends, data enhancement, audience segmentation product, which we call Insight Data. So I'm going to move this just a little bit further along here. Excuse me. Just to give you a little background before we get really into the meat and potatoes of this, I had came to Webbula last August. Before that, I had sent out, mostly on the advertising agency client side, send out millions of emails, did a lot of email campaigns. And to be perfectly frank, I was totally unaware of this business model, that there was anything like email hygiene, and there was any of these problems or threats or things that were impacting the clients that we were sending emails out on behalf of. So it was kind of an eye-opening lesson, and it has been an interesting journey for me personally, and I know for Jenna as well, since she joined the team here.
Yes.
So what we thought was, it's kind of, we're new to the whole thing, and we thought that was kind of an interesting perspective because a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is stuff that we've been experiencing for the first time, and so we thought that was kind of an interesting perspective to take on it. So I know that a lot of you who are on this, and again, welcome aboard, are probably in the industry. You've probably been doing this for a while yourselves, and you know as well as we do that a lot of the competitors, a lot of the companies, and a lot of the silos that are in this industry have their own industry definitions and the way they converse or talk about certain products and problems. So we thought, we'd start off with 2 definitions, sort of get all of us on the same playing field, on the same page, right? So when we talk today about verification, we're talking about, a product that's been out for a while now that essentially checks for hard, soft bounces, gray listing, and certain types of spam traps, which we refer to as typo traps. And that primarily is inactive threats that are, the email either works or it doesn't. Essentially, it's basically a go or no-go switch. When we're talking about email hygiene, though, we're talking about more active threats, things that are a little bit more, they're a little deeper, that are kind of hidden. Some of them are almost impossible to detect and or very difficult to detect, but each of which lies on a spectrum of danger from, oh my God, I'm on fire and I need water, to that was annoying. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about some of those different threats and the spectrum that they lie on. And then hopefully through learning a little bit more about some of those, we will reveal some, some information and some background and some tips that will help you to understand exactly what you have when you're looking at your email data, your customer data, and how that affects your sender score, your sender reputation, and your ability to send through ESPs and deal with your IPs and all the other challenges that face email marketing today. So we're going to get started with Jenna's going to tell us a little. Oh wait, see what I said? She just pointed at me. So yeah, so what we did was we don't have the kind of time today to go into a comprehensive informational download sort of every single type of threat. So we thought what we would do is we would talk about ones that are kind of clumped and are more common, and that come from different points on that spectrum that we talked about. So from oh my gosh, I'm on fire and I need somebody to water me or call an ambulance, to that was kind of annoying and a waste of money and effort. So that's how we've approached this today. We're going to go through these in clumps and then and talk about them. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask those. Put those in the chat, right? And then and at the end, we're going to talk a little bit more about best practices in general and how to maintain your email list. So Jen's going to tell us a little bit about. We'll start with disposable domains.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Yeah. So disposable domains are pretty much that temporary emails. They do deliver. These are kind of like the 5, the 7, the 10-minute emails. Then they explode. So it's important to note that these do pass verifications. This is kind of why you need Hygiene to detect these. A good example for the disposable domains would be a shared email account. These are like no passwords. It's a public account. Many people use it for multiple reasons. Right.
That's a good point to make too, is that these are often emails that are available publicly on forums, various types of forums, and that anyone can be associated with those emails, so that it becomes impossible to know who is actually behind that email. So and again, I just want to reiterate that everything we're talking about today is we're approaching this from a marketing perspective and not trying to make any sort of judgment calls on why things work the way they work. But from a marketing perspective, it kind of doesn't make any sense to consider these people to be customers, because it's impossible to connect the email to the person.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, they're pointless to the market. These are dead emails, but they aren't dead people. Which brings me to our next threat, which are truly dead, with zombies.
We call zombies, right?
Yeah. So these are emails that
are really dead.
Don't really have any problems, except for the fact that they're
pushing up daisies.
Yeah, there's no one on the other side. So
they don't have a credit card over there, do they?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So
why should the marketers care about this? Well, no one's buying anything. They're not buying your products.
No, and it's a real email though, right?
It is a real email.
Yeah. So I mean, it wouldn't show up as a bounce or a gray listing or anything else. It is an actual email. Yeah. And and the other part of it too is that it's a dead email that has no one on the other side. And if nothing is done with it, it has also the potential to morph or to evolve into something a little even more nefarious.
Yeah, there's zero engagement, and your ISPs rely on that engagement, so it damages your sender reputation.
It's a very good point, and it's something we want to also bring up, and we'll probably mention this a whole lot today, is engagement. Obviously, engagement is part of that overall, and it's becoming more and more important now as we move into the future with the things that are going on in the world. The engagement profile of your sender reputation is more and more important. So that's more what the ISPs and the ESPs are looking for in your score, is how engaged your audience is. And if you're sending emails to people who are dead, obviously those emails are never going to convert or turn into sales.
Just a wasted marketing resource.
Right, exactly.
You should avoid it. Yep.
Please avoid that. Yeah. So the next one, we're going to talk a little bit about, excuse me, our robots. And I'm sure a lot of us know about this. It's not anything new. There's a lot of nefarious things going on and a lot of reasons why bots exist in the past. And I know I've in marketing and advertising, I've used a few of these that we're going to come across. I've actually used in campaigns for various reasons myself in the past. So, but essentially what we're talking about today are bots that are hitting your forums, hitting your sign-up forums, your contest entries, and basically giving you false information. They appear as if they are real emails, but actually, again, there's no one attached to the back end, and it's impossible to draw that line, that connection. A lot of what we believe in here at Webbula is actually making that connection and guaranteeing or verifying that there's a actual living human being behind it. And bots make that impossible. There's a lot of things obviously that you can do on your end to try to mitigate that. From CAPTCHAs to double opt-ins to proper setup of landing pages and redirects, and permission passes and things. We'll get to some of that later. But yeah, so that is obviously these are not real. They're getting past.
They're screwing with your metrics.
They're screwing with your metrics. Yeah, it's not going to result in any kind of marketing result that's going to be positive for you. So, and then again, like we mentioned earlier about dead emails, bots also have a chance to turn into something a little bit worse, and that's when we get into talking about phishing attacks. And I'm sure we all know about phish. There's been great, we can think of 100 examples over the last few years of horrible things that have happened as a result of that. But from our perspective, we're talking about marketing and how that impacts your list. So again, it's phishing are malicious mostly. I mean, really bad. They're trying to steal something, take something, passwords or credit card numbers or personal information, and present themselves as something that they're not. Obviously, it's a little bit like, from a marketing standpoint, it's a little bit like when your mother used to tell you, don't hang out with that crowd at school because they're a bad influence. And it's a little bit like that. It's like, hanging out with a bad actor, with a bad kid who's constantly telling you, we could get away with this. We could, if we tried really hard, do something, we could steal the principal's password and change our grades, right? I actually did that once. Did you know that? No. Anyway, it's a different story. A story for a different time. But again, it's a bad crowd. You're hanging out with the wrong types of people. If you're marketing to them, then you have a chance to become associated with their activities. And through association, that can ding your sender reputation and hurt your ability to properly market or legally market to the customers that you want to reach. And again, it's best just to avoid them, right? Mm-hmm. And not to mention that they often can lead to
spam traps. So spam traps are used by organizations to identify the spammers. There are different kinds, such as like seeded trackers, blacklisted emails, moles, honeypots, typos. Damages they could cause for you are they damage your sender reputation. Yep. Your IP addresses may be added to a blacklist. Worse, they could hit a spam trap operated by a major ISP, and it could permanently blacklist your sender domain. Right.
Which again, this is one where we could probably spend an entire webinar entire 30 minutes talking about. Yeah, we can spend it. Sorry, Jen, it's very distracting, but we could spend a whole webinar talking about spam traps. There are so many different kinds, and blacklists too. There's different types of blacklist, and there's different
high list.
The sound keeps going in and out. We're sorry, Izzy. We'll try to do better and not move so far away. I think that's me. Yeah, you're welcome. I think that's me probably mostly turning my head and looking at things. But essentially, again, from a marketing standpoint, we want to avoid these because of the potential risk that's involved with what could happen and the unknown about once that email's gone out, it's out of your control. It's you no longer have the ability to take control of your email, and it can start doing things that you're not aware of. So hang on, we'll get to those questions here in a little bit.
Real quick, the last thing I wanted to say on spam traps is verification is great for detecting the typos.
Right. But that's
they cannot detect all the other sorts of spam traps. So that's where Hygiene comes in.
Right.
So next, since we're on the topic of spam traps, I wanted to mention honeypots, which are a type of spam trap. They're interesting because they are invisible to the human eye. They're everywhere. They're in your code. They're in your sites. There could be 50,000 to 1,000 honeypots in your data. But they're there for a specific purpose.
Right, and not necessarily a nefarious one. They're kind of on our side. They're mostly white hats, right? Doing good work, catching spammers, looking out for those bots that we were talking about earlier. Fighting the good fight. But again, it's a wasted marketing effort. Because they've been created for a singular purpose, and the attempt to market to them isn't going to go well. So again, an email like this, an email that's a spam trap, an email that's a honeypot is not going to convert. So so that's important to remember.
Another important thing is verification also absolutely cannot detect.
No.
So Hygiene.
Right. Yeah.
Can.
Right. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about, we call these malicious moles. They're emails that are reporting statistics to the blacklist. And again, we could probably spend an entire webinar talking about the different types of blacklists that exist, from black hats all the way down to white hats, to good guys and bad guys. Or again, from a marketing perspective, however, malicious moles are basically spam cops or scomps that are reporting anonymously under identity protection to different types of blacklists for different reasons. Each person has their own reason for doing it, and essentially, we just want to avoid them. You can't really market to them. The idea of your email landing on their laptop or in their email chain, again, nothing could happen, or it could end up being reported. And if it's an ongoing thing, the risk goes up. So it's a question of, again, that spectrum of between being on fire and being mildly annoyed and wasting marketing dollars. It's a question of what the risk versus reward is. The reward here is zero from a marketing perspective, but the risk is very high. So it's a potential problem that's really just best to avoid it. Yep. Right. And this brings us to CP trackers, right? Which is another type. Excuse me. This one, from a marketing perspective, is something that marketers and advertising agencies and ESPs and others use for a good reason, because they're trying to determine what the efficiency and deliverability of a particular email campaign might be. And there's nothing wrong with that necessarily.
There's no harm. Nothing. Right. No one's getting reported.
They're not reporting. They're not collecting personal data.
Yes.
They're basically collecting data about campaigns. And But this is kind of like stranger danger in a way, because oftentimes these emails that have been created don't die. They aren't necessarily turned off. They can end up in your email campaign. And let's just say that, just to pull a name out of my hat, Procter & Gamble ran a national campaign last year, and they used a bunch of seeded trackers to determine deliverability. And now you turn around and you want to do your own email campaign for your particular product or service, and you've got a bunch of Procter & Gamble seeded trackers that they just forgot to turn off. They're still going to be reporting your email campaign statistics back to the people who created that. So again, it's a zero sum as far as marketing goes. They're not going to turn into sales or anything like that, and it's best just to avoid them. Right. Ooh.
All right. So our last threat would be screamers. So screamers and complainers are similar in the way. Screamers are a lot worse. They report you to the ISPs or to the FTC or to a blacklist. And if you get enough complaints, they will monitor you and potentially put you on some sort of list. So it's also very important to state that verification cannot detect these screamers or complainers. You want to know why? Because these are real people.
They are real people, that's right.
These are real emails. So the issue can be detected by...
They just don't like getting emails.
No, they just don't. They complain a lot.
They're
screamers.
Yeah.
So...
Yeah, and they can report you, especially the screamers. And when you think about it this way. Once you, like we said earlier, once you send that email out, what happens to it on the other end is often a question of whether or not you've established a relationship with the person on the other end. And the more you've established a relationship with the person on the other end, the more control you essentially have. So if you have no relationship with the person on the other end, then you have no control. And this is a good example of that. From sending it to someone who may have forgotten that they opted in or may have forgotten that they signed up for this email service, and they hit the junk mail button or the spam button on their browser, then that there's an action that happens when anybody hits the junk button or the spam button. There's an action that happens, and this is the same type of thing. If you're sending to a complainer or heaven forbid a screamer, there is an action that happens after that email lands in their inbox, and usually that for the worst case, that could be a direct report, not necessarily even to you, but to the person who's behind your email, the ESP that's been helping you, or directly to, often what we find is Comcast or some other ISP is the one that's actually getting it, because people don't necessarily understand how the mechanism works. Excuse me, I was losing my voice there. And that can result in you ending up on a blacklist, or at the very least, your ISP, which is obviously the gatekeeper for a lot of this, is going to ding your reputation. So
that is not good.
Not good, yeah. So, okay, so apologies. So in summary, we talked a little bit about 6, I think, or 8 of these, and what they have to do with verification and email hygiene. So we just wanted to run you through a little bit of that and explain where each of these come from and the threat level on the spectrum. Some of those, are minor annoyances. They're a waste of email resources. They're a waste of time and energy, and they're going to result in essentially zero engagement, which is going to hurt your sender reputation in the end. And then others are more active threats, which are essentially out to report or to scandalize or to nefariously grab information from it. So before I move on to the next section, I just wanted to take a second here to talk to Michael and Izzy, Douglas, who had asked about spam traps, and the answer is yes, of course. There are certain types of spam traps that can open and click. Yes. So now we're going to spend a few minutes talking a little bit about excuse me, list maintenance and open and click through rates, and how we can positively identify and impact deliverability on the other end. So again, we don't want to, I know it's hard to tell for us who the audience is and what the level of expertise. I'm sure we have a spectrum with that as well. So if you have any questions, or if you have any concerns, or you want to talk more, at the end of the webinar, we'll have our contact information up, and feel free to reach out afterwards or in the coming days and reach us, and we can go into more detail, specifically to you and what your challenges might be. I understand that this webinar in particular can often be elementary in some ways, and also, but we're trying to educate and also provide some actionable things that you can actually work on your side. But again, we're not going into depth. We don't really have that kind of time. So to speak to blacklist and things too, and some of the things that we talked about earlier about spam traps and the impact they can have, again, getting off of those, and once those emails have left your control and landed in the inbox, it's a lot of work to rectify some of those problems. And we believe that, doing a lot of the work up front, doing a lot of the homework, doing a lot of the legwork, and building a proper list, and subjecting that list to proper email hygiene is a way to avoid those kinds of problems. We all want to work in a world where our emails are getting through to our customers and that they're properly engaged, because all statistics, no matter who you are or how you look at it, have proven that fully engaged, deliverable campaigns are going to result in higher levels of sales. And that's really what it's all about. Whether we're, I once worked for a company that was not selling anything, but communicating to patients, right? So it was a large patient population that needed to communicate, and then we had faced the same challenges there with email hygiene and list building and opting in. And that information was very, very critical to communicate on a regular basis. So, it doesn't always have to be a product or a service or a sale. But again, the same fundamental things apply to all of it across the spectrum. So let's talk a little bit about some of these things. I think one of the things that works really well for me is to think of email lists like a garden.
Oh, this is a good one.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a metaphor. If you plant a garden, you plant seeds, they'll grow. The more time that you take to prune and manage that garden, the more fruit that it's going to give you. If you abandon it or you let it go to seed, you're going to have weeds. Every once in a while, weeds are going to pop up, bugs are going to infestate. You need to take care of that. And a lot of what we're going to talk today is just steps to help the garden grow properly and deliver beautiful flowers or whatever type of garden it might be, and to keep the weeds at a minimum so they don't choke out the things that you're trying to do. So, permission passes are great. And we can talk about scheduling and things. And I've got another slide here in a few minutes that'll talk about some of that. But essentially, we want a consented and opted in choice audience, an audience that has made it clear that they want to be a part and they want to participate in the communications that your company or your agency or your group is trying to have with them. There are many, many ways to, creatively approach running a permission pass. You can hide it in a very creative way. One we were talking about just this morning was a birthday consent, where it's their birthday or a couple weeks before their birthday, and you send out another email, hey, it's your birthday, we just noticed, we'd like to continue talking to you. Are you okay with that kind of thing? And then on your end, there's, let's take a permission pass and create a landing page for it, do some custom redirect links that we can manage and monitor, and that we can keep an eye on and see who's responding and who's not responding. And those are really great ways to keep your audience engaged, but also for you to know data-wise that these are still real emails, and that line that we talked about is connected between the email and an actual real human being who has a credit card who might want to buy something. So then part of the problem with permission paths is that you can't really run those on third-party lists, and that third-party lists, just buying email data in bulk or pulling this down. I actually did this years and years ago I didn't buy the list. The client bought the list. Client bought the list, came to us at the agency and said, I want to mail to this list. We didn't know that they had bought. Where did you get this data? It's this data we had. And so we did. I think we sent out about 100,000 emails, and I just thought of this morning because I forgot this story, and we got dinged pretty hard because this was 12 years ago or so. So a lot of the rules that we're operating under today weren't established yet, but still, third-party lists, there's no relationship, there's no line between you and them. These people have not opted in. They have not chosen to receive any emails from you. And as we all know, the way the world's working today in Europe and Canada, the rules are changing as far as establishing that relationship and how we maintain that. And so it's bad hygiene. Third-party lists are bad hygiene. Instead of doing that, we highly suggest that you look into appending your data instead. The data you have, let's talk about how we can append that data instead of buying third-party lists. So here's what we were talking about earlier about how often. I know that there is an industry sort of argument going on about how often you have. I see every day I see people saying, oh, you should do it every 3 weeks. No, you should wait 6 months. You should wait a year. In my opinion, I think that depends. It highly depends on the type of business and how often you're communicating with your customers or your data. Engagement feeds engagement. We all know this as a rule of thumb in our business. The more engaged our audience becomes, the more likely they are to respond to whatever our marketing message is. So we say, engagement feeds engagement. Just keep them engaged. If they're not responding and they're inactive, then have a process for that. Subscribers cost money. If they're not active, they're a negative sum for you. They're costing you money, and they're not going to return on that investment. So the sooner you find out for sure that they're inactive, the sooner you can remove them from the list and work on getting new ones that are going to be. It also, if you have a whole bunch of inactives on your list, it makes testing hard because you're getting false results. You're getting false negatives to a lot of your A/B tests, a lot of your landing page tests, a lot of your data that you're trying to market to is going to return and not really give you an honest answer. So again, that's a way to look at that. So, I forgot to change the slide. And then, of course, our last tool, or one of the biggest tools in the toolbox now, is double opt-ins. Again, to the point earlier that the world is changing, double opt-ins are becoming a standardized way to look at this and a way to approach acquiring customer information and customer sign up. Have your forms signed up, have it captured, try to mitigate the effect that bots can have on your forms and your contest entries, or however you're collecting the data, whether it's in person at a store, on an iPad, or on the internet, or through a third party, and then send those confirmations out, and then have them confirm that they really want to be a subscriber. So that's really important. And then that way, all of these steps really come down to having confidence in your data and understanding that a large percentage of the population that you are responsible for are real people. And real people tend to respond really well as opposed to people who are dead. So and again, if there was a couple of things we wanted you to have an opportunity to take away from today, it would be these. That first of all, verification is not enough. It's not enough. It might have served its purpose for one time or another, but in this changing world that we're living in, these threats and these things that are coming up are impacting our email data in ways that were really anticipated a few years ago, and they're changing rapidly. And verification is not enough. And Second, that dead emails, dead end emails are not going to convert. An inactive or an aggressively inactive email is never going to convert, and that list maintenance is incredibly important. Maintaining your garden, weeding that occasionally, and letting the fruit grow. Those are very, very important things. So with that, are there any questions? And again, what do we suggest for zombies? How to cut back on them? Well, I mean, it's tricky from a customer standpoint. It's very, very difficult to be able to identify who's dead and who's not. So again, I think if you have that prescribed, whatever your particular prescribed schedule is for inactives, I think that will help obviously weed out a lot of those, because those dead emails are not going to respond to whatever you're sending. So managing that in a normal way is going to work really well for you. Then a certain percentage of those zombie emails, I mean, if you think about it from a perspective of your own personal experience, I'm sure that we've all had, relatives or that have passed on. So you just have to watch. Sometimes those aren't dealt with, and that long term they can become a problem. They can become a spam trap, essentially. Do I have a suggestion on email content, images or not? From a creative standpoint, I think the more creative your emails can possibly be, the more engaging they tend to be. I think that you probably have some kind of brand standards that you're working from, and that those emails should speak to that. Whether there's images or not, I know there's a lot of debate about content and about the size of emails and things like that. I would definitely check. There's a lot of factors that go into an answer. So I would definitely check with your ESP or whoever you're relying on for your emails, your creative team and your marketing team, and work out what you think would be a great solution for you personally. It's hard for me to just give you a blank answer for that one. Getting in touch with scammers or screamers. Complainers are sort of a different level of that. I really, really would avoid trying to communicate with screamers at all. These are essentially, we've identified a subset of an audience who is militantly opposed to receiving emails.
They just don't want it.
They just don't want it, and so changing their opinion or changing their mind is really something that we would, or rather, would you advise re-engaging an entire list? Let's say I've got 100,000 active members, but a bunch of them on the list, 1 million in total. Should I re-engage members that have opened within the last 6 months, but not in the last 2 months? Yeah, to that point, earlier we were talking about that schedule of re-engagement. And so I would say that if your turnoff is at 6 months, then that's where that would be the last attempt that you should make. I think generally anything past 6 months is going to be too long. So yeah, I would say, if you want to make that your demarcation line, that's probably when you would, I wouldn't go any longer than that. I'm sorry. Sorry for the silence. We're just looking at your questions. You're welcome, Matt. Rick says, email security bots that register clicks and opens, what could be done about them? I would, Rick, I would definitely advise sending us an email afterwards, because I have to say that as far as bots go, that's not my expertise here at Webbula. I know Doug or Tim or Vince would probably be better suited to answer that. That's a very technical question. Yes. And I would feel more strongly about passing that on to them. Yes. And we can get an answer back to you really quickly.
All these questions are not answered.
Do I need CAPTCHA to prevent bots if I use double opt-in and without confirmation? I don't send any other email. Well, I mean, again, your specific situation is going to be specific to you, so it's hard for me to say. But I personally believe that CAPTCHA is not a bad thing to have on any form. I think that if you're asking for the general public, if you're sending to a very specific audience that you know, then maybe not. But if you're sending out to the general population, then you should have a CAPTCHA. It's not going to hurt you. It's only going to help you. So we would recommend that. I think it's not going to be harmful. All right. Again, if there's anything else, here's our contact information, and here's Ongage's contact information. And we, again, want to thank Ongage for having us and hosting this today. And if you have any questions, you can send us an email or send me an email at bward@webbula.com. And I will pass it on to the proper authorities or answer it myself. And, be sure to check us out on the web, visit our website. And if you have any questions, let us know.
Yeah.
Say thanks, Jana.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
All right. So, yeah, thanks, Brian and Jenna, for the very useful information. And thanks, everybody, for joining. And hopefully we provide you with some useful tricks. So we'll be shortly sending everybody a mail that will have a recording of this webinar. So sharing is caring. Of course, feel free to share with relevant colleagues and friends. And as Brian pointed out, if anybody has any question specifically on the webinar, or you want to hear more about the Ongage services or the Webbula services, then our details are right here, and feel free to reach out to us. And just before we say goodbye, are there any last questions, or are we all good? Looks good to me. All right. Well, thanks again, and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.